Lily Park stood frozen outside the music school, her fingers clutching the strap of her bag too tightly. Through the glass door she could see students walking in and out, some carrying instrument cases, others holding sheets of music. A knot formed in her stomach as she checked the time on her phone again. Her first piano lesson in 15 years would start in 10 minutes, and all she wanted to do was turn around and go home. This is ridiculous, she muttered to herself. At 24, she felt way too old to be starting piano lessons again. The last time she had touched a piano was when she was a teenager, right before she quit without warning, breaking her mother's heart in the process. A young boy pushed past her to enter the building, his violin case bumping against her leg. The contact jolted Lily back to reality. She took a deep breath and finally pulled open the door. Inside, the school was alive with sound. Distant scales ran up and down from behind closed doors. Someone was practicing a flute in one of the rooms upstairs. The smell of wood polish and old books brought back memories Lily had buried long ago. The receptionist looked up with a friendly smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for my lesson with Mr. Rivers," Lily said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "Of course. Room 7 down the hall to your left. He's expecting you." The walk down the hallway felt longer than it should have. Each step brought back flashes of her childhood, the excitement she once felt before lessons, the pride when she mastered a difficult piece, and then the growing pressure that eventually made her walk away. She wasn't here by choice. 3 weeks ago, her mother had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease. The doctors were optimistic, but the diagnosis had hit her mother hard. "Before things get worse," her mother had said during a quiet moment in the hospital, "I'd love to hear you play again just once." And just like that, Lily found herself unable to say no. Room 7's door was slightly ajar. She knocked lightly before pushing it open. The space was smaller than she expected, dominated by a grand piano that gleamed under the soft lighting. The walls were lined with bookshelves stuffed with music books and old vinyl records. A man in his 60s stood by the window, looking out at the street below. He turned when she entered, his eyes sharp and assessing behind wire-rimmed glasses. This was David Rivers, once a celebrated concert pianist whose career had been cut short by arthritis. Now he taught a select number of students, most of them young prodigies on their way to music schools and competitions. Why her mother had arranged lessons with such a distinguished teacher was beyond Lily's understanding. She was nowhere near that level, and she had no ambitions to be. "Miss Park, I presume," he said, his voice carrying the slight rasp of age but still commanding. "You're right on time." "Yes, sir," she replied, feeling suddenly like a schoolgirl again. He gestured toward the piano bench. "Please sit." Lily moved awkwardly to the piano, placing her bag on the floor beside her. The polished keys looked both familiar and foreign, like running into a childhood friend who had grown into a stranger. "Your mother tells me you played for 8 years before stopping," Mr. Rivers said, standing beside the piano. "She described you as having natural talent." Lily felt her cheeks warm. "Mothers tend to exaggerate, perhaps. Or perhaps they see things in us that we cannot." He picked up a thin book from a stack on top of the piano and opened it to a marked page. "Let's see where you stand. This is a simple exercise for beginners. Play it through, please." Lily stared at the sheet music. It was indeed basic, the kind of piece given to children in their first few months of lessons. 5-finger positions, quarter notes, nothing complex. Part of her felt insulted, but a larger part was relieved. At least she couldn't mess this up too badly. She placed her hands on the keys, surprised by how cool and smooth they felt against her fingertips. For a moment, she couldn't remember which finger went where, her hands hovering uncertainly. "Take your time," Mr. Rivers said. Though his tone suggested he had little patience for hesitation, Lily began to play. The first few notes came out stiff and mechanical. Her fingers felt like they belonged to someone else, clumsy and unsure. But as she continued, something familiar stirred within her. Her hands remembered what her mind had forgotten, settling into positions that once were second nature. The simple melody filled the room, nothing impressive, just a basic tune meant for practice rather than performance. Still, by the time she finished, her hands felt more like her own again. Mr. Rivers' expression revealed nothing. "Again," he said simply. Lily played the piece once more, this time with slightly more confidence. When she finished, she looked up at her teacher, waiting for his assessment. "Your technique is rusty, as expected," he said, jotting something in a small notebook. "But the foundation is still there. Your mother wasn't entirely wrong. Coming from him, Lily suspected this was high praise. For this week, practice this exercise daily. I also want you to work on these finger drills. He placed another sheet in front of her. Your fingers need to relearn their independence. That's it? Lily asked, surprised by the simplicity of the assignment. Mr. Rivers raised an eyebrow. Did you expect Chopin on your first day back after 15 years? Lily felt foolish. No, of course not. Playing the piano isn't just about pressing keys, Miss Park. It's about rebuilding a relationship with the instrument. He closed his notebook. The school has practice rooms available to students. I suggest you make use of them, especially if you don't have a piano at home. I don't, Lily admitted. Her apartment was too small for even an upright, and electronic keyboards had never felt right to her. Then I'll make sure you have access. Practice at least an hour each day before our next lesson. He looked at her over his glasses. May I ask why you've returned to piano after so long? Lily hesitated, unsure how much to share with this stern stranger. My mother asked me to, she finally said. She's not well and it would make her happy. Something in Mr. Rivers' expression softened almost imperceptibly. A noble reason, though not ideal for long-term motivation. He walked to the window again. The best musicians play because the music itself demands to be played, not to please others. Lily didn't know how to respond to that. She had never felt that way about music, at least she didn't think she had. Our time is up for today, Mr. Rivers said, turning back to her. I'll see you next week, same time. As Lily gathered her things and the sheet music, she felt a mixture of relief that the lesson was over and a strange disappointment. She had expected to feel nothing but obligation when she sat at the piano. Instead, there had been a faint echo of something else, a whisper of connection she thought had died long ago. Outside the music school, Lily called her mother. How was it? Her mother asked, her voice hopeful despite the slight tremor that had become noticeable in recent weeks. It was okay, Lily answered, unsure how to describe the experience. He gave me simple exercises to practice. David Rivers doesn't take on students unless he sees potential, her mother said. He taught at Juilliard before he retired. Did you know that? Lily hadn't known, and the information made her even more confused about why he had agreed to teach her. Mom, why him? I'm sure there are plenty of teachers who work with returning adult students. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Because you're better than you let yourself believe. Lily, you always were. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with years of unspoken disappointment and regret. I have to go now. Mom, Lily said, unwilling to dive into that particular conversation. I'll call you tomorrow. That evening, after a long day at her job as an administrative assistant, Lily returned to the music school. The receptionist gave her a key to a small practice room on the second floor. It contained only an upright piano, a chair, and a small desk lamp. Lily sat at the piano, placing the simple exercise in front of her. She began to play, repeating the melody over and over as instructed. The repetition was mind-numbing, but she forced herself to continue, watching the clock on the wall tick forward. An hour passed. Her fingers felt sore in a way they hadn't in years. She should leave now, having fulfilled her daily practice requirement. But something kept her seated at the bench, her hands resting lightly on the keys. Without the sheet music to guide her, Lily began to play a piece she had learned as a child, a simple minuet in G that had once been her favorite. She stumbled through the first few measures, missing notes and rhythms. But as she continued, more came back to her, like waking up from a long sleep. She didn't notice the cleaning lady pausing in the hallway, listening with a small smile before moving on. She didn't notice the time slipping away as she moved from one half-remembered piece to another, each one bringing back different memories. It was only when her phone buzzed with a message from her roommate asking if she was okay that Lily realized it was nearly 10 o'clock. She had been playing Lost in the Past for over 3 hours. As she packed up to leave, she felt something she hadn't expected, a reluctant curiosity about what might happen in her next lesson, and what other memories might be waiting for her, buried beneath years of neglect but not entirely forgotten. A week passed in a blur of routine. Every morning Lily would drag herself out of bed, rush through breakfast, and head to her job at the insurance company. Her days were filled with filing claims, answering calls, and typing emails that all started to sound the same. Then each evening after work, She would return to the music school and practice the simple exercises Mr. Rivers had assigned. The practice room became a strange comfort. Unlike her noisy apartment where her roommate was always watching TV or talking on the phone, the small space offered a quiet that Lily hadn't realized she craved. Sometimes she would sit in silence for several minutes before even touching the keys, just enjoying the rare peace. On the day of her second lesson, Lily arrived early. She hadn't planned to. A meeting at work had been canceled, giving her an unexpected free hour. She slipped into room 7, hoping to get some practice in before Mr. Rivers arrived. To her surprise, he was already there, seated at the piano, and he was playing. Lily froze in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt. The piece wasn't one she recognized, but it filled the room with a complexity of emotion that made her breath catch. Mr. Rivers' hands moved across the keys with the ease of someone who had been speaking this language for decades. His eyes were closed. His stern face transformed into something gentler, almost vulnerable. He finished the piece with a series of quiet, thoughtful notes that seemed to hang in the air even after his hands had come to rest in his lap. "I'm sorry," Lily said softly. "I didn't mean to intrude." Mr. Rivers turned, showing no embarrassment at being caught in such a private moment. "No need for apologies. Music is meant to be heard." He gestured for her to come in. "You're early. What was that piece?" Lily asked as she set her bag down. "It was beautiful. Something I composed many years ago," he replied, closing the fallboard over the keys. "It never found its way to publication. Sometimes the most personal music isn't meant for everyone's ears." Lily hadn't known he was a composer as well as a performer. She wanted to ask more, but sensed he was already moving on from the moment. "Let's hear your progress," he said, standing to give her the bench. Lily sat down, suddenly feeling even more inadequate than during her first lesson. After hearing what the piano could do in truly skilled hands, her simple exercises seemed like child's play. Nevertheless, she began to play the assigned pieces. Her fingers moved more confidently now, a week of daily practice showing in the smoother transitions and more even tempo. When she finished, Mr. Rivers nodded. "Better. Your hands are remembering." He opened his notebook. "Today we'll work on dynamics and touch. The notes themselves are only the skeleton of music. The life comes from how you play them." The lesson passed quickly as he guided her through different ways of pressing the keys, sometimes with a light, feathery touch that barely made a sound, other times with a firm pressure that made the notes ring out boldly. "Music is about intention," Mr. Rivers explained. "Each note should be played exactly as you mean it to be heard. Nothing accidental, nothing careless." By the end of the hour, Lily's mind was full and her fingers tired in a way they hadn't been after her previous practice sessions. This wasn't just repetition. This was attention to details she had never considered before. "I've added a new exercise to your practice materials," Mr. Rivers said as the lesson ended. "Work on the dynamics as we discussed. And Lily." He rarely used her first name. "Try to find 10 minutes each day to play something you enjoy, not just the exercises. The discipline is necessary, but so is the pleasure." It was the closest thing to warmth she had received from him, and it caught her off guard. That evening, Lily stayed later than usual at the practice room. The new exercises were challenging, requiring her to think about each note in a way she never had before. 2 hours passed before she realized how late it was getting. She should go home. Her roommate would be wondering where she was again. But as she gathered her things, her fingers brushed against the keys once more, playing a soft, aimless melody. Without really thinking about it, Lily sat back down. The melody continued, wandering into something unfamiliar. She frowned slightly, trying to place the tune. It wasn't one of her exercises, nor was it one of the pieces she had played as a child. Her left hand joined in, adding harmonies that complemented the melody in her right. The music grew, becoming something richer and more complex than the simple exercises she had been practicing. Lily's heart beat faster. She wasn't playing from memory. She wasn't playing from sheet music. The notes were coming from somewhere else, somewhere inside her that she didn't understand. The music built into something that seemed to express everything she couldn't say aloud: her fear for her mother's health, her regrets about giving up piano years ago, her uncertainty about her future. Her fingers moved faster, finding patterns and progressions she had never been taught. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her hands rather than the other way around. Time slipped away as the melody evolved and transformed, taking her on a journey she hadn't planned but somehow recognized, like a dream of a place she had never been but knew intimately. A sudden noise in the hallway startled her back to reality. Her hands froze above the keys, the spell broken. The cleaning lady stood in the doorway with her cart, looking apologetic. "Sorry to disturb," the woman said. "I didn't think anyone was still here." "No, it's fine," Lily replied, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "I was just leaving." She checked her phone and was shocked to see it was nearly midnight. She had been playing for almost 3 hours. "That was pretty," the cleaning lady offered as Lily gathered her things. "What's it called?" Lily paused. I don't know," she admitted. And it was true. She had no idea what she had been playing or how she had played it. On the bus ride home, Lily's hands couldn't stay still. They tapped rhythms on her knees, her fingers remembering the feeling of the keys beneath them. Her mind raced, trying to understand what had happened. She had never improvised before, had never created music on the spot. Yet tonight music had poured out of her as naturally as breathing. It felt like discovering she could suddenly speak a language she had never studied. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How was your lesson today?" Lily stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Her actual lesson with Mr. Rivers had been hours ago. What had just happened in that practice room was something else entirely. "Good," she typed back simply. "Learning a lot." She put her phone away, watching the city lights pass by the bus window. The music was still there, playing in her head. Snippets of melody, harmonies that twisted and resolved in satisfying ways. If only she could write it down, capture what she had played. But Lily had never learned to compose, to translate what she heard into notes on a page. By the time she reached her apartment, exhaustion had caught up with her. Her roommate, Tina, was still up, watching a late-night talk show on low volume. "There you are," Tina said, looking up from the couch. "I was about to send out a search party. Since when do you stay out past midnight on a weekday?" "I lost track of time," Lily replied, dropping her bag and sinking into the armchair. "I was practicing piano." Tina raised an eyebrow. "Must be some practice. You look like you've seen a ghost." Maybe she had. The ghost of what might have been if she hadn't quit all those years ago. Or perhaps the ghost of what could still be. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I think I might have some talent," Lily said quietly, almost to herself. "Well, yeah," Tina replied with a laugh. "Your mom's been saying that for years. That's why she's so excited you're playing again." That night, Lily's dreams were filled with music. Complicated pieces she couldn't possibly know how to play flowed from her dream self's fingers. She woke several times, melodies still echoing in her mind, only to fall back asleep and find herself once again at a piano, playing impossible music. In the morning, she called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Instead of going to the office, she went straight to the music school. She needed to know if what had happened last night was real or just some strange fluke. The morning receptionist gave her a curious look, but handed over the practice room key without question. Lily's hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the door. The upright piano waited for her, looking no different than it had the day before. Lily sat down, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. "Please," she whispered. Though she wasn't sure who or what she was asking, she began to play her assigned exercises, warming up her fingers as Mr. Rivers had taught her. Then, hesitantly, she let her hands wander, searching for that same freedom she had found the night before. For several minutes, nothing came, just hesitant notes that led nowhere. Just as disappointment began to settle over her, a melody emerged. Different from last night's, but with the same feeling of rightness, of discovery, rather than creation. Once again, Lily felt herself become a vessel for something she didn't understand but somehow knew how to express. This time she was prepared when the music took over. She surrendered to it completely, letting it carry her where it wanted to go. Lily missed 2 days of work that week, calling in with vague excuses about not feeling well. Her boss sounded skeptical but didn't press the issue. Lily had never taken sick days before, building up months of unused leave over her 3 years at the company. The truth was, she couldn't tear herself away from the piano. The music that flowed from her fingers when she let go of conscious control had become a kind of addiction. Each session started the same way. She would play her assigned exercises dutifully, then slowly drift into improvisation that grew more complex and emotional as time passed. She tried recording herself on her phone, hoping to capture what she was creating. But listening to the recordings later never matched the experience of playing. Something was lost in translation, the feeling of being carried by the music rather than creating it. By the time her third lesson with Mr. Rivers came around, Lily was exhausted but buzzing with a nervous energy. She hadn't told him about what was happening. Part of her worried he would dismiss it as the clumsy experiments of an amateur. Another part feared he would somehow make it stop, that putting her improvisation under his critical eye would cause the magic to evaporate. She arrived at room 7 exactly on time, her hands fidgeting as she waited for him to invite her in. "You look tired," Mr. Rivers observed as she took her seat at the piano. It wasn't asked as a question, but the slight tilt of his head invited an explanation. "I've been practicing a lot," Lily replied, which was true enough. His eyes studied her face. "Let's hear your exercises." Lily began to play, working through the finger drills and simple pieces he had assigned. She tried to focus on the dynamics as he had instructed, making each note intentional. But her mind kept wandering to the music that lurked just beyond these structured exercises, waiting for her to set it free. "Your technique is improving," Mr. Rivers said when she finished, "but your attention is elsewhere today." He tapped his pencil against his notebook. "What's troubling you, Miss Park?" The use of her formal name reminded her of the distance between them. He was her teacher, not her confidant, yet something in his steady gaze made her want to trust him with what was happening. "I've been playing other things," she began carefully. "Not just the exercises. That's good. I encouraged you to play music you enjoy." "No, it's not that." Lily struggled to find the words. "I've been playing music I don't know. Music I've never heard before. It just comes out." Mr. Rivers' expression didn't change, but his pencil went still. "Show me." The directness of his request caught her off guard. Lily's hands hovered over the keys, suddenly unsure. The improvisation had always happened when she was alone, often late at night. Could she call it up now under his watchful eye? "I don't know if I can just try," he said, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. Lily closed her eyes, trying to find that space inside herself where the music lived. She played a few tentative notes, searching for the thread that would lead her into the flow. For a painful minute, nothing came, just disconnected notes that sounded aimless even to her ears. Then, just as she was about to give up, a melody emerged. Simple at first, like a question being asked. Her left hand found harmonies to support it, and the music began to grow. Lily felt herself slipping into the familiar trance, her conscious mind stepping back as something deeper took control. She forgot Mr. Rivers was there. Forgot she was in a lesson. The music swelled and receded like tides, carrying emotions she couldn't name, a longing for something just out of reach, a joy so sharp it bordered on pain. The melody twisted in unexpected directions, finding resolutions that felt both surprising and inevitable. When the piece finally came to its natural conclusion, Lily opened her eyes. Her hands were trembling slightly, and she realized she had been playing for much longer than she intended. She looked up at Mr. Rivers, bracing herself for criticism. His face was completely still, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "How long has this been happening?" he asked finally. "Just since last week," Lily said. "After our last lesson. I stayed late to practice and it just happened." Mr. Rivers walked to the window, his back to her. For a long moment he said nothing, and Lily felt a growing certainty that she had disappointed him somehow. "Mr. Rivers, I know it's not what I should be focusing on. Do you know how rare this is?" he interrupted, turning back to face her. "True improvisation, not just noodling around familiar patterns, but creating fully formed musical ideas in real time. It's a gift few trained musicians ever develop." Lily blinked, unsure she had heard him correctly. "But I'm not doing it on purpose. I don't even understand what I'm playing half the time. That's precisely what makes it remarkable." He returned to his chair, leaning forward with unusual animation. "You're tapping into something intuitive. Most pianists spend decades developing the technical foundation to express what you're accessing naturally." His words should have been flattering, but they filled Lily with a creeping anxiety. I don't understand what's happening to me. You're remembering, he said simply. Remembering what? I never learned to play like this. Not the music itself. You're remembering how to listen to what's already inside you. He regarded her thoughtfully. Why did you stop playing as a teenager? The abrupt change of subject caught her off guard. I don't know exactly. It got complicated. Complicated how? Lily shifted uncomfortably on the bench. My mother had plans for me. Competitions, recitals, music school. The better I got, the more pressure there was. It stopped being something I did for myself. Mr. Rivers nodded as if he had expected this answer. And now? Now it feels like something I can't not do. Lily surprised herself with the honesty of her response. When I'm really playing, not just exercises, it's like I'm finally having a conversation I've been waiting to have my whole life. A rare smile crossed Mr. Rivers's face. That's as good a definition of musical calling as I've ever heard. The rest of the lesson transformed into something entirely different from what Lily had expected. Instead of more exercises, Mr. Rivers guided her through an exploration of her improvisation. He asked her to play in specific keys, to try different tempos to build around particular emotions. Sometimes he would play a starting phrase and ask her to continue it, watching with fascination as she took his seed of an idea and grew it into something neither of them had anticipated. You have a gift, he said, as their time came to an end. But gifts require nurturing. You need to learn the language of music more formally, theory, composition, so you can understand what you're creating instinctively. Can you teach me? Lily asked. Some of it, but you'll need to work twice as hard on the fundamentals now. Your intuition has raced ahead of your technique. He made some notes in his book. I'm adjusting your practice regimen, and I want you to start recording your improvisations, not on your phone, but properly. I'll arrange studio time. As Lily gathered her things to leave, Mr. Rivers added, Have you played for your mother yet? Lily shook her head. I wanted to get better at the exercises first, to show her I was making progress. Sometimes we wait too long for perfection, he said quietly. Don't make that mistake. The words followed Lily as she left the music school. She took out her phone and called her mother. I'd like to come over tonight, she said when her mother answered. I want to tell you about my lessons. Later that evening, Lily sat in her childhood living room, perched on the edge of the old upright piano bench. The piano was out of tune after years of neglect, some keys sticking slightly when pressed. Her mother watched from her favorite armchair, her hands resting on her lap. The slight tremor in her right hand was more noticeable today, and Lily felt a pang of regret for all the years she had let pass without music between them. Mr. Rivers says I have a gift, Lily said, her fingers finding their position on the keys. I want to show you. And then she began to play, letting the music speak the words she had never found a way to say, about fear and forgiveness, about lost time and second chances, about love that persisted through disappointment and distance. As the last notes faded, Lily looked up to find tears streaming down her mother's face. I always knew. Her mother whispered, I always knew you had music in your heart. For the first time in 15 years, Lily felt the weight of old resentments lifting. In their place was something new, a determination to see where this unexpected path might lead. The next few weeks passed in a blur of practice and learning. Lily cut back her hours at the insurance company, switching to part-time so she could devote more energy to music. Her boss wasn't happy, but Lily found she cared less than she would have expected. For the first time in years, she had something in her life that felt more important than job security. Mr. Rivers had restructured their lessons completely. Now they split their time between technical exercises to improve her fundamentals and theory lessons to help her understand what she was creating instinctively. He introduced her to music notation software so she could begin capturing her improvisations. Though the process was frustrating, trying to pin down on paper what flowed so naturally through her fingers felt like trying to bottle a river. It's always been this way, Mr. Rivers told her during one particularly frustrating session. The greatest musical ideas often arrive fully formed in the mind or hands, and the composer spends weeks or months refining them into something that can be written down and shared. I'm not a composer, Lily protested. What do you think you're doing when you improvise? He countered. You're composing in real time. One Tuesday afternoon in late April, Mr. Rivers closed his theory book earlier than usual. There's something I want to discuss with you. Lily had learned that this formal tone usually preceded something she wouldn't like. What is it? The school holds a recital at the end of each term, primarily for the younger students to show their progress to parents and family. He folded his hands on his desk. I would like you to perform. Lily felt her stomach drop. Me with the kids? Not exactly. I'm suggesting you close the program. As a special feature. I can't perform in public, Lily said quickly. Not since I was a teenager, and even then it was just small recitals. This is a small recital, Mr. Rivers pointed out. But that's not really your concern, is it? Lily looked down at her hands. What if I freeze? What if the music doesn't come? Then you'll play something we've prepared as a backup. His expression softened slightly. Lily, gifts like yours aren't meant to stay hidden in practice rooms after hours. Music exists to be shared. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course. The recital is in 3 weeks. You have until Friday to decide. That evening, Lily visited her mother instead of going to the practice room. They sat in the kitchen together drinking tea as Lily explained Mr. Rivers's proposal. Oh, honey, that's wonderful, her mother said, her face lighting up. The tremor in her hands was worse today, tea sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her cup. Your first performance in all these years. I haven't said yes yet, Lily reminded her. I'm not sure I can do it. Her mother set her cup down carefully. What are you afraid of? The directness of the question caught Lily off guard. Failing, I guess. Disappointing everyone. What if I get up there and nothing happens? And what if something magnificent happens? Her mother countered. What if this is the beginning of everything you were meant to do? Mom, let's not get carried away. It's just a small recital at a local music school. Every journey has a first step. Her mother reached across the table and took Lily's hand. I've never asked you this before, but I'm asking now. Play at this recital, for me. Lily felt the familiar weight of her mother's expectations, but something was different this time. There was a new urgency in her mother's request, a fragility that hadn't been there before. Is everything okay, Mom? Lily asked, suddenly concerned. Health-wise, I mean. Her mother hesitated, then sighed. Dr. Mitchell says the medication isn't working as well as they'd hoped. We're trying something new next week. She squeezed Lily's hand. But I don't want you worrying about that. I want to see you play. I want to see you shine. 2 days later, Lily told Mr. Rivers she would perform at the recital. Excellent, he said, showing no surprise at her decision. We'll need to prepare carefully. Your improvisation is extraordinary, but performing requires a different kind of focus. The next 3 weeks were the most intense of Lily's musical journey so far. Mr. Rivers worked with her on techniques to center herself before playing, to create the mental space where the music could flow even with an audience present. They developed a structure for her performance. She would begin with a simple melody they chose together, then use it as a springboard for improvisation. Think of it as a safety net, Mr. Rivers explained. If you feel lost, you can always return to our starting theme. At home, Lily practiced breathing exercises and visualization. She played for her roommate, Tina, and for a few friends from work, gradually getting comfortable with having eyes on her while she created music in real time. Despite the preparation, as the day of the recital approached, Lily's anxiety grew. The night before, she barely slept, her mind racing with all the ways she could fail publicly. What if everyone thought she was a fraud? What if Mr. Rivers had overestimated her abilities? The recital was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Lily arrived at the music school 2 hours early, her stomach in knots. The performance space was larger than she had imagined, not a grand concert hall, but a proper auditorium with a stage and seating for at least 100 people. In the green room, she paced nervously as families with excited children in formal clothes streamed in, young pianists, violinists, and cellists all preparing to show off months of hard work. Lily felt out of place among them, too old to be a student, too inexperienced to be a teacher. Breathe, Mr. Rivers reminded her when he stopped by to check on her. Remember, the music is already inside you. Your only job is to let it out. An hour later, Lily sat in the audience watching as one child after another performed their carefully prepared pieces. Some played with technical precision but little feeling. Others made mistakes but played with natural musicality. Parents beamed and took photos regardless of how their children performed. Lily's mother sat beside her, looking more tired than usual but dressed elegantly for the occasion. She had insisted on taking a taxi alone to the music school, refusing Lily's offer to pick her up. "I'm not an invalid yet," she had said firmly over the phone. "Save your energy for the music." As the program progressed toward her closing spot, Lily's hands grew cold with nervousness. She excused herself during the second-to-last performance, a young cellist playing a Bach minuet, and went backstage to collect herself. She was doing her breathing exercises when Mr. Rivers appeared at her side. "It's time," he said quietly. Lily nodded, unable to speak. She followed him to the wings of the stage, listening as he went out to introduce her. "Our final performer today is somewhat unusual," she heard him say. "Lily Park is not one of our young students, but an adult returner to music after many years away from the piano. In the short time she has been studying with us, she has displayed a remarkable gift for improvisation, the creation of music in the moment. Today she will take a simple melody and transform it before your eyes and ears. Please welcome Lily Park." There was polite applause as Lily walked onto the stage. The grand piano gleamed under the stage lights, its lid raised to project the sound. Lily's legs felt unsteady as she crossed to the bench and took her seat. The audience was a blur of faces, but she could just make out her mother in the third row, leaning forward slightly in her chair. Beside her, surprisingly, sat Tina, who must have come straight from her Saturday shift at the hospital. Lily placed her hands on the keys, trying to remember all the preparation, all the techniques Mr. Rivers had taught her, but her mind was a jumble of fear and self-doubt. The silence stretched uncomfortably as she froze. Just as panic began to rise in her throat, she caught sight of her mother's face. There was no expectation there, no demand for perfection, just love and pride, already given before she had played a single note. Lily closed her eyes and began the simple melody they had chosen. A folk tune Mr. Rivers had taught her, gentle and wistful. Her fingers trembled slightly on the first few notes, but as the familiar pattern emerged, she felt something shift inside her. The music was there, waiting, not as a task to be performed correctly, but as a conversation to be had, a story to be told. She let the melody repeat once, twice, then began to elaborate, adding harmonies, changing the rhythm, exploring the emotions hidden within the simple tune. As always, there came a moment when conscious thought stepped aside and something deeper took over. The music flowed through her, no longer constrained by fear or self-consciousness. It grew and changed, sometimes delicate as whispered secrets, sometimes bold as a declaration. She played her mother's strength and fragility, her own journey away from and back to music, the unexpected gift that had been sleeping inside her all these years. Time lost its meaning. There was only the music, the moment, the connection between her hands and heart, and the audience holding its collective breath. When Lily finally brought the piece to a close, returning to a simpler version of the original melody, before ending on a quiet, questioning chord, the silence that followed seemed to vibrate with something unresolved. She opened her eyes, suddenly aware again of where she was and what she had done. For one terrible moment the silence continued, and she thought she had failed after all. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then building to something Lily had never expected. People were standing. Her mother was wiping tears from her eyes. Mr. Rivers at the side of the stage was nodding with a smile she had never seen before. In that moment, Lily understood that something had changed forever. The music had always been inside her, but now it had found its way out into the world, and there would be no going back to who she was before. The days following the recital passed in a haze for Lily. She returned to work on Monday, filing insurance claims and answering phones as if nothing had changed. But everything felt different. Colleagues who had never shown interest in her life suddenly wanted to know about this piano thing they'd heard about from others. "Are you going to quit and become a musician now?" her cubicle neighbor asked during lunch. Lily had laughed it off, but the question lingered. What exactly was she going to do with this gift she had rediscovered? At 34, she was too old to start a traditional music career. Conservatories and music schools wanted young prodigies they could shape, not adult beginners with unusual talents. On Thursday evening, Mr. Rivers called her at home, something he had never done before. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said when she answered, his formal tone somehow more pronounced over the phone. "But there's a matter I wanted to discuss before our next lesson." "Is something wrong?" Lily asked, immediately concerned. "Quite the opposite. I've received several inquiries about you since the recital. One in particular I think you should consider." He paused. Thomas Harden was in the audience on Saturday. The name meant nothing to Lily. "Who is that?" "A composer, quite well established in contemporary classical circles. He specializes in collaborative work between electronic and traditional instruments." Lily sat down at her kitchen table, trying to process this information. "Why would he be interested in me?" "He's working on a new piece that incorporates improvised piano. He was quite taken with your performance and has asked if you would be interested in meeting to discuss a possible collaboration." A week ago, this would have seemed impossible, the stuff of daydreams. Now Lily found herself considering it as a real possibility. What would that involve exactly? "That would be between you and Thomas. But it would be a professional opportunity, Lily. Paid work as a musician." After they hung up, Lily sat in her quiet apartment, thoughts racing. Part of her wanted to call her mother immediately with the news. Another part was terrified by the possibility of stepping further into this new world, of people expecting things from her talent that she wasn't sure she could deliver. Before she could decide what to do, her phone rang again. This time it was Tina, her voice tight with worry. "Lily, you need to come to the hospital. It's your mom. She collapsed at home and her neighbor called an ambulance." The world tilted. "Is she okay?" "What happened?" "The doctors think it might have been a bad reaction to her new medication. They're running tests. She's asking for you." Lily grabbed her keys and ran out the door. All thoughts of music opportunities forgotten. The hospital corridors seemed endless as she followed the directions to the neurology floor. She found Tina waiting outside a room, still in her nurse's scrubs, though she worked in a different unit. "She's stable," Tina said before Lily could speak, "but they want to keep her overnight for observation." Lily's mother looked small in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm and monitors beeping softly beside her. But her eyes brightened when she saw Lily. "There's my pianist," she said, reaching out a trembling hand. "I'm sorry for the drama. Not how I planned to spend my evening." "What happened?" Lily asked, taking the chair beside the bed. "Just got a bit dizzy and took a tumble. Nothing broken, thank goodness." Her mother's attempt at lightness didn't hide the fear in her eyes. "The doctor says the new medication might be too strong. They'll adjust it." They talked quietly for a while, carefully avoiding the bigger questions about what this meant for her mother's condition. Instead, her mother wanted to hear about any aftermath from the recital. When Lily mentioned Thomas Harden's interest, her mother's face lit up. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Your first professional opportunity." "I don't know if I'm going to do it," Lily admitted. "It's all happening so fast. And with you not feeling well." "Stop right there," her mother interrupted, her voice suddenly stern despite her weakened state. "Don't you dare use me as an excuse to hide from your gift again." "I'm not hiding." "Yes, you are. I can see it in your face. You're scared, and you're looking for reasons to back away." Her mother's hand tightened around Lily's. "I did this to you the first time, putting so much pressure on you that you ran from music entirely. I won't let you use me as a reason to run again." Lily felt tears welling in her eyes. "But what if I can't do what they expect? What if the recital was just luck? Then you'll fail trying something that matters to you." Her mother's expression softened, which is far better than succeeding at something that doesn't. Later that night, after her mother had fallen asleep and Lily had been assured by the doctors that she could go home, she found herself walking to the music school instead of her apartment. It was nearly midnight, but she still had the key to the practice room, and she needed to think. The building was dark except for the security lights in the hallways. Lily made her way to her usual practice room and sat at the upright piano, not turning on the lights, letting the faint glow from the street lamps outside guide her hands to the keys. She played softly, letting the music reflect her tumultuous emotions, fear for her mother, uncertainty about her own path forward, the strange mix of terror and excitement at the opportunities suddenly appearing before her. As she played, her thoughts began to clarify. The choice wasn't really between music and no music anymore. That decision had been made the moment she sat down at the piano after 15 years away. The question now was what kind of relationship she wanted with this gift. Did she want to keep it private, a personal joy and comfort? Or was she ready to share it with the world with all the vulnerability and responsibility that entailed? The music shifted beneath her fingers, becoming more resolved, more certain. By the time she finished playing, Lily knew what she needed to do. 3 months later, Lily stood backstage at the Contemporary Arts Center, listening to the murmur of the audience filing into the auditorium. Thomas Harden's new piece, Conversations, was premiering tonight, a collaboration between electronic music, a string quartet, and Lily's improvised piano. The rehearsals had been intense but exhilarating. Thomas had created a framework within which Lily could improvise freely, the other musicians responding to her cues as much as she responded to theirs. It was music that could never be played exactly the same way twice, music that lived in the moment. Lily had quit her job at the insurance company 2 months ago. Between the commission from Thomas and a growing number of private students, people inspired by her story who wanted to rediscover their own musical voices, she was making a modest living from music for the first time in her life. In the front row tonight sat Mr. Rivers, who had become more of a colleague than a teacher in recent weeks. Beside him, in a wheelchair but dressed elegantly for the occasion, was Lily's mother. The new medication regimen had stabilized her condition for now, though everyone understood it was a progressive disease with no cure. What mattered was that she was here, that she would hear her daughter's music bloom in this new context. As the lights dimmed and Thomas introduced the piece to the audience, Lily felt a familiar flutter of nerves. But underneath the nerves was something stronger, a certainty that had been building since that first night when she stayed late at the practice room and discovered what had been waiting inside her all along. When she walked onto the stage and took her place at the grand piano, she didn't look at the audience. Instead, she nodded to the string players, acknowledged Thomas at his electronic setup, and placed her hands on the keys. The first electronic tones began, setting a pattern that would underpin the entire piece. The strings entered one by one, creating layers of harmony. Then it was Lily's turn. She closed her eyes and found that space inside herself where the music lived, not a place of fear anymore, but a home she had returned to, a conversation she had rejoined. Her fingers began to move across the keys, finding melodies that spoke to the electronic pulses and string harmonies around her, sometimes following, sometimes leading. As the piece built toward its climax, Lily opened her eyes and found her mother watching her, tears streaming down her face, not tears of sadness but of recognition. In that moment, they both understood that whatever happened next, whatever challenges lay ahead with her mother's health or Lily's new career, the music would be there. It had always been there, waiting for her to find the courage to truly hear it. The piece ended not with a grand resolution but with a gentle question, Lily's piano the last voice to speak. As the final note faded into silence, she felt a profound sense of rightness. She had found her way back to her gift, but on her own terms this time. The applause washed over her like a wave, but it wasn't the validation that moved her. It was the knowledge that she had finally stopped running. From her talent, from her mother's expectations, from the person she was meant to be. As she stood to acknowledge the audience, Lily caught her mother's eye and smiled. The journey hadn't ended. In many ways, it was just beginning. But she was no longer afraid of where it might lead.